All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another CMS Wire webinar. My name is Jared Hornsby, and I'm here today to help answer any general or technical questions that you may have. But first, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Hidden Secret to Increased Conversion. If you have any questions throughout today's entire presentation, you can use the Q&A module on the right side of your screen to drop those in. At the end, we'll be having a Q&A section, so please wait until the end to get those questions asked. A little bit about us over at CMS Wire. We were founded in 2003, and you can read more of our great content and register for upcoming conferences and webinars by visiting cmswire.com. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Arke, for making today's webinar possible. Arke exists to reimagine how brands form lasting connections with customers by transforming meaningful insights into memorable digital experiences that drive conversion. Over from Arke today, we have Paul Collins, the Chief Strategy Officer, to tell us a little bit more. Paul, take it away.
Good morning. I also wanted to introduce Natalie Bourne and Mohammed Sharif, if you guys want to say hello.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be with you today and excited for this particular conversation. I know it's going to be a good one.
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. And yeah, definitely excited to hear more about this.
Great. Well, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's afternoon for me where I'm at, so it's a good afternoon to you all. The hidden secret to increase conversion. Let's get started in a very unconventional way. My wife and I recently celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary, and I'm glad we got married at the age of 16, or else I'd be extremely old. But admittedly, I've been out of the dating game for a long time. But I've got three boys that tell me a lot has changed in the dating world. Even though some of the same principles that are tried and true still apply. So I'm going to begin with a question for all of you guys. Let's play pretend and imagine going on a first date. So I want you guys to get yourself in that mindset. And what if your date just sat there and talked about how wonderful they were? They didn't give you a time to answer any questions or ask any questions, or time to talk. Rather, they focused on themselves, how wonderful they were, how much money they made, what kind of car they drove, how many awards they won in the third grade swim team. It would be just a very one-sided conversation. I'm expecting, and I don't want to answer for the group here, but that won't be a very successful date. And I'm answering for the group, but I'm expecting that you would say, nope, not going to go on a second date. Yet, that's how most companies sound on their websites. They focus on products and services, features rather than benefits, transactions instead of experiences. They focus on positioning their brands in the mindsets, not in the lives of their customers. I found an interesting study on Harvard Business Review of more than 5,000 consumers and 50 brands. And those brands were kind of split equally. There were legacy and traditional brands, and there were newcomer digital brands. And that would include things like Airbnb versus Hilton or Marriott, or Dollar Shave Club versus Gillette, Venmo versus an American Express, or Tesla versus BMW. In every case in this survey, the legacy and traditional brands ranked higher as the brand that people looked up to the most. However, the newcomer and digital companies ranked the highest when it came to the brand that made their lives easier. So this study painted two very distinct buckets of brands that shape what people think about their brand along the purchase path, and then those that influence how people experience their brand at every touch point. We'll get into the latter in a little bit. So what happens when you sit there and you talk about yourself all the time? Like that date, the customer loses interest or feels like a commodity. In fact, 70% of the customers, this is a source of McKinsey, 70% of the customer's journey is based on how they feel they are being treated. But feeling like a number is basically the opposite of what we want people to feel when making a purchasing decision. And I think we're in a period of transition from an experience economy to the transformation economy. And in a transformation economy, consumers are seeking more. They're craving experiences that are more authentic, more meaningful. They connect on a personal level and almost transform their behavior. So all too often come across companies that make veiled attempts to put the customer first. They talk a game about customer experience, but they're really serving an ulterior motive to meet the needs of the business or shareholders or a board or a boss or a short-term need. They're not solving customers' problems. Yet 73%, according to Forbes, of customers expect companies to anticipate and understand their needs. And I think that's a typical expectation given all there is information about our digital fingerprint in the world, whether it's social, sites we've visited, information we've provided. It's in a post-COVID era, I think that the typical need states that we come across the most are speed, convenience, simplicity, and value. These reign supreme. So I'll ask each of you, what's the last time that you've asked your customers what their needs are? Some of you have, some of you haven't, or if you have, do you have a plan to repeatedly ask that question throughout the year as the customer needs evolve? So I don't think it's a surprise. It's expected to say that customer expectations are an all-time high and rapidly evolving. The bar is being set by companies, some that may not even be in your respective industry, or they may not even be a company that currently exists, and they come out of nowhere to disrupt the industry. Examples of that I come quickly to mind are Warby Parker or Casper. These companies are getting it right because they prioritize the experience just as much, if not more, important than the products or services that they offer. Yet, we still face companies that aren't keeping pace, and they hide behind legacy processes, mindsets, technologies, instead of building relationships. And Natalie, I'm going to invite you. Do you want to tack on to that?
Absolutely. I think, Paul, what you're stating is fairly profound here. I mean, let's think about, I know we talked about, you kind of touched on it quickly, and I want to go a little deeper on the experience economy and why it even came about, right? And why we're now transitioning to a different transformation economy, right? So if you think about the experience economy, it started out with commodities, right? Let's think about coffee beans. They were just commoditized. Everyone sold those, right? But then when you packaged it, you now had a good. And then when you poured it out at a cafe, you actually had a service. But when you, the first day of fall, drive through the Starbucks drive-through and get your pumpkin spice latte, now you have an experience. And I think that's why it's so important as we're talking about experience that we think about those different product lines and ask yourself the question, where do I fall? How am I speaking to my customer? Am I speaking as a commodity? Am I speaking as a good? Am I speaking more from a service or an experience? Because when you speak from the standpoint of an experience, we know that studies show that it's a tangible price increase up to 16%. You can charge more when creating an experience. And so why this is so important is because another study out there showed that 80% of CEOs think they provide a great experience and only 8% of customers actually agree, which is an experience gap that's fairly vast. And so if this is true and we're not nailing the experience, then trying to nail the next phase of economy that's coming, which is the transformation economy, is almost impossible if we're not nailing the experience economy. And so what Paul was talking about earlier was things in this survey that was done. It's a PwC survey that you can go find around experience, but it talks about really two things. If you bucket everything into two things, people want relationships and results. And so are we providing that relational aspect, that relational experience in our communication, and are we delivering results? Because one without the other is not effective. But when you put the two together, that's the power of experience. And if you nail that, it's not either or, right? It's not experience economy is dead and now we're doing transformation. It builds on one another. So once you nail the experience economy, you're able to actually get into that transformation layer. And really, Paul, when I think about your content, what you're bringing to the table today, that's exactly what we're trying to nail. That once you land experience, you can start to look at transformation as your true north.
And to add to your point, thanks, Natalie. I think that without that focus on experience, it leaves companies to compete more on price. You called it commodity, but with that lack of differentiation on a product and or a service, it really just leaves price to be the differentiating factor, because there's not a lot that differentiates you from one another.
That's spot on. And when you are focused only on price, that's really truly a race to the bottom, isn't it? I mean, it's because now you're not putting yourself on a footing where you can actually win.
So moving forward, we've talked a lot about building an experience. I don't think that is anything new here. I think that is the desired solution. It's all encompassing and it's a pretty ambiguous word, but it's not the ultimate result that we're looking for. The result, like Natalie said, we're looking for an experience that is so profound, that is so visceral, it's so useful and so powerful that it rises above the everyday and forms an emotional connection. And here's another source reiterating your point, Natalie, from Forbes, that 2/3 of consumers want brands to connect with them. I'm reminded, you know what, I'm going to back up for just a second. I'm reminded of, there's a book called The Power of Moments, written by the Heath brothers. And in it, they describe about the importance of creating defining moments. They describe a defining moment as one that is memorable and meaningful and even rewires our understanding of ourselves. It doesn't take much to do that either. In the book, it talks about Magic Castle Hotel. It's in Los Angeles. And Magic Castle, to me, looks like nothing more than a Holiday Inn motel. It's really nondescript. Yet they beat out 5-star hotels. They beat out the Ritz-Carlton, Beverly Hills, the Four Seasons, and all of these. The customer reviews are amazing. And you ask yourself, what are they doing different? Well, they're building an experience that forms an emotional connection by doing even the little things right. One of my favorites, and it's a little outdated now, but they talk about the popsicle hotline. It's a red phone that exists in the pool area, and you ring the popsicle hotline, and the Heath brothers talk about, someone shows up with white gloves and a silver tray and a tray full of popsicles. They offer free laundry service and deliver it back the same day, wrapped in butcher paper and time. It's these things that create that sense of elevation and that lasting impression. So, like that first date, let's go back to the importance of making a great impression. And that becomes the foundation for a true relationship, one that will lead to increased customer engagement, conversation, interactions, and ultimately loyalty. Forrester came out with a stat that sites with superior user experience can have a 400% higher conversion rate. So what if we could do the same? Completely reimagine the experience in order to inspire and captivate customers, clearly set our company apart from competitors, and drive exponential growth. Let's look at how we achieve that. We can and we will, and we use this framework to exponentially boost revenue and conversion. It is a very familiar symbol to hopefully most of you, the $. So the $, we're going to spend a little time dissecting or deconstructing the $. This stem, which we call the spine, represents the customer journey from that first touch point through that purchase decision. And you can notice that this is a fully connected stem where every touch point needs to be seamlessly interconnected. Like a spine, if there's a gap, it's going to cause damage. And in this case, these gaps in the customer journey, as it relates to a digital experience, come in the form of friction, or inconsistent experiences across channels, confusing navigation, slow loading web pages, poor design. And, I want you all to remember that we don't get a second chance to make a great first impression. So this is how I've seen a lot of companies look at that spine, which I'm calling the customer journey. And they focus on that last mile, that piece of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water. They flip the script and prioritize and concentrate solely on that transaction stage. They argue about getting messages above the fold, anguish over the placement of a CTA button, overwhelm customers with content because they've got to get their little message out there. They shout offers and promos as if that's going to help really land the customer. I've talked to many companies that spend millions on conversion rate optimization, where they're analyzing that shopping cart, to move, this button to here, only to move the needle a half a point and claim victory. So we look at this customer journey as having 3 distinct pieces, and what lies beneath is often forgotten. And yet that's some of the biggest piece of that iceberg. And we look at the inspiration and the information stages. Are we getting people inspired? Are we attracting them? Are, like that first date, are we getting them interested in us? And then are we guiding them with the information? Are they finding the information that they seek, finding that more worthwhile? So let's shift from the spine of the dollar sign to the S. And the S represents completely reimagining this digital experience to become the centerpiece of your business. We're in the process of redefining what a website really is. In many cases, if you tell someone, well, I'm a digital, we're in a digital experience and technology company, they look at you at a dinner party and go, what? And then we build websites and apps. Oh, okay. Hey, you know what? I've got a hairdresser that's a friend of mine. You know, you may want to talk to them. And I think we've got to redefine what this website is. It's not just another cog or checkbox in the marketing ecosystem. It's certainly not a static brochure, and it's not something that should be left unattended. It needs to become a living, breathing entity that becomes your hub, the front door to you, your brand, your business. In that sense, it must be your best salesman, your best store, your most valuable source of information. And I'm often wonder why companies shell out millions and millions and millions of dollars on their stores or showrooms or office buildings and fight for every penny they spend on their digital presence. You know, I'm reminded of a restaurant franchise that we were talking to as we went through digital transformation, and they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on billboards. And, you know, we're fighting to get, you know, maybe $1 million to do some of their digital transformation. And I said, well, can't you just eliminate 10% of those billboards? And he said, no, the brass won't let that happen. And I said, well, are you able to even track what type of ROI you can get from those billboards? And the answer was no. So I give us a word of caution here that, you know, instead of anguishing over search engine ranking or prioritizing digital marketing spends, you know, to drive traffic, I ask you, where are you driving them to? And is that destination meant and deliver a conversion rich experience? If it isn't, you're failing to maximize the spend that you're providing. So a word of caution, and this comes from PwC. Imagine losing a quarter of your customers in a single day for good, because that's exactly what could happen after just one bad experience. How do we avoid that? We look at the top of the S, and that comprises a series of work streams and activities designed to challenge the status quo and set your brand apart from the competition. So over on the far right, we talk about insights, and those insights are where we roll up their sleeves and dig into things about the customer, the business, and the technology. And we use those points to dig in and ask provocative, probing questions of the business. And you know, we've got to think disruptively at this point. We've got to just get away from doing the norm. So we like to challenge our customers with tough questions and push the envelope and maybe get them into that uncomfortable zone. But it's only after that we can begin to innovate, and we can begin to bleed into territory that will set you apart from the brand. I think the last piece of this stage is if we're successfully doing that and building that roadmap to get there, you've got to get that alignment organizationally. You've got to build consensus and get buy-in, and get everybody believing and behaving along that line, because that'll add friction along the way. The core of the S, I call this the money section of our dollar sign. And this is where the experience comes to life, to form a deeper, more empathic connection with the customers. And we've talked a lot about how do we do that experience and create more of a relationship. Well, we do that by seamlessly intertwining design, content, and technology. So doing that enables customers to interact in previously unimaginable ways. I talked to Gartner not too far back, and one of the most asked questions or sought after topics is generative AI. And I think we know that that is one of those things that people are trying to figure out. They're fearing, they don't want to miss out on taking advantage of this. I think there are other things out there that are still just as effective. And that is configurators, personalization, augmented reality. We're in an era where it's a digital revolution like nothing before. The lines between the physical and the digital are increasingly blurring. Next generation technology, like we mentioned here, are all examples where it's impossible to decouple the design from the content and from the technology. They are one, and that's what makes them so valuable. They accelerate the speed at which we can generate content. They adapt to unique needs of varying customer segments and bring products and services to life. So Mo, this is where I want to lean on you and your expertise to pick up.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I think when we think about design and experiences specifically, experience is going to change, right? And it's going to be more personal. One, because of generative AI, but also because of all these different technologies that we're seeing, whether it's AR, generative AI, even generative UI, where we can start creating personalized visual experiences based on the user. But in order to do all that, you really need that three pieces of it, right? The design, the technology, and content. And you need to be able to compose them in the way you need to. So it can't just be, I have one product that does everything. It's really being able to compose your technology stack and being able to compose your ecosystem, because it's not just about technology, it's your whole ecosystem. And we're seeing a lot of different tools that excel in different pieces. For example, image generation and using generative AI for image generation, or maybe being able to personalize based on users' intent and how users are interacting with your site. You want to be able to use all these different technologies together to create a single unified experience that inspires your customers and really transforms how you go about. So as Paul, as you said, it's not about that brochure where it's one size fits all, where everyone goes to your website to see what you think of yourself. It's what can I do for you across all these different channels, across all these different experiences that are not just text based, they're visual, they're video, and they're also augmented reality. So yeah.
Great, yeah. So, and Mo, I'm going to give you a chance to talk a little bit more here, but I think that the point here is that you can't leverage these next generation technologies to their fullest without thinking composable. You know, it makes things possible for your companies to be more customer centric, to act swiftly and adapt to market changes and provide unparalleled scalability. And I know that Sitecore is at the forefront of that. Do you want to add anything further to that?
Yeah, I think like we've gone on to this composable journey for quite a long time at Sitecore. And one of the key reasons is exactly that. It's the way to help you as a customer innovate and help you flourish, because you cannot do this without being composable. And we understand that we have tools, but so do others. And being able to be that good neighbor with other technologies and giving the customer the ability to choose what's right for them to compose their whole ecosystem is really what it's all about. And we think that's the only way for customers to be able to innovate and stay on track to what's happening in the world, really, and the innovation that's happening, whether it's Gen AI or anything else really around that.
I wanted to jump in here and just say, as I listen to both of you talk, I really see what you're building here in the conversation we're having. It's really ecosystem innovation. It's not just one thing. It's looking at the entire ecosystem. It's making sure you have clear feedback loops in place. It's making sure you have real-time data and insight. It's making sure that the C-suite's aligned to actually be able to respond to these real-time insights and real-time data. And then it's really this tech stack communication. And so as I listen to this and just you guys talk, I think there has to be a clear understanding also in this ecosystem of who you're talking to and what they need. And that can feel really hard if you have thousands of people coming to your website every day. But that's the beauty of Gen AI. And that's where it comes into play to help you make those handoffs very clean.
Good point. So let's wrap up the S here. By the end of the journey, the bottom of the S, we've hopefully built a foundation on trust and credibility and a rapport with the customer. In this case, the purchase decision almost becomes instinctive, and it's a natural extension of a positive experience. At this point, in some ways, flippantly stated, I tell companies to get out of their own way, reduce the friction, simplify that path to purchase, shorten down forms, make it easy for them to just make that transaction. But one of the more important thing beyond the purchase is, are you capturing and consolidating this data as they've gone through this customer journey to then leverage that to continue the conversation, to continue the dialogue, and optimize the experience and proactively communicate on a more personal level with that customer moving forward, turning customers into advocates.
Yeah. And Paul, I'd like to add here is
Sure.
around the analytics, because there are two pieces here that are really, really important. One is, what are you measuring? You mentioned it at the start when you focus too much on SEO and how many people are coming through SEO. But is that what your goal is, or is it outcome oriented? Should you be measuring through an outcome oriented experience where you're measuring, am I achieving, or is the customer achieving the outcome they're looking for or not? And two, there's just so much data out there that you have to collect, and then you build these huge projects so that you can collect that data, but without identifying why you're collecting it and how you're going to use it, it's worthless. And that's where you need insights, not just data around it.
Yep, that's great. So at this point, we're back to, we've constructed our dollar sign. And hopefully we've successfully incorporated each step into our process. Your analytics are showing record growth, revenue is up, and you're high-fiving colleagues. Many are content to stop here. And I looked ahead a little bit. I saw a few questions on, where can you get your biggest bang for the buck? Or what can drive people the most to these websites? Where you, is exponential conversion achievable over a long time? Well, I start with, there's no silver bullet here. And I think a lot of people focus on a thing, a thing that they can hold their hat on, that's not looking at themselves in the mirror. And I don't want that to sound confrontational, but I think this whole model is built upon the value of building relationships, building those connections, building experiences, not just focusing on a thing, on where we appear in a search engine. And I don't want to discount the importance of digital marketing and SEO rankings, for sure. But I've all too often seen where people focus on those things and driving those traffic and being able to show those numbers, but take them to a site, a destination that isn't optimized, that isn't built there to be your best self. So I ask, are you taking advantage of your of your budget as much as you can? So I talked about many stopping here, and great, we are seeing results, but we call this just the beginning, because I think one of the more important concepts of becoming exponential is you have to be willing to take a step further. Now, we all know, I mean, there are industry stalwarts like Ritz-Carlton or Nordstrom that are known for the customer experience and the customer service. But every story you hear is just this little one thing that sticks out. It's like, well, the Nordstrom, this salesperson clerk helped de-ice a pregnant woman's car and walk out their packages, or someone lost their tux and needed something built. You hear these little stories. So I think we have to consciously be looking beyond that initial sale and build a relationship that generates repeat purchases and grows the customer lifetime value, because that's what it'll take to deliver exponential results. So I, can't do as a digital experience and technology agency, we have to have some creative pictures, but I wanted to just show a few here. And one of these is a client that may even be on this phone call, is Curry and Company. And they're an amazing company. And their showrooms are decked out every season, down to every last detail. Their products are handcrafted. I've visited their warehouse and seen people hand gluing on things to, finistry to their chandeliers. It's an amazing process. And we needed to bring that to life online. We needed to tell that story, because that was what made Curry special. So the redesign and replatform, I look at it as that we've created almost an online showroom where there's a story behind each product. In fact, you're looking at one of those where the artist that created the sphere of influence in the bottom there is we provide a story about this person. We get into we kind of pull back the curtain and bring the customer in. But it could also be other things like configurators. This multi-pendant drop fixture is got hundreds of different combinations, and how we had to fully integrate and create a logic sequence within the e-commerce platform to make that work. Shortening up, just simplifying a form for their customers. All of these things can add up and make the difference. Another is a clothing apparel company. And, with this, we mixed storytelling with conversion optimization to show what's possible for a luxury brand. We called it story selling. And in this, AI was used to change, expensive photo shoots into virtual shopping experiences in seconds. Polo shirts were removed from their white static digital box and placed onto endless racks that were interactive and could provide recommendations and scene building to match the selections and also to upsell and cross-sell. So certainly willing to go into more of these examples. I've providing my contact information, and these are just a few examples of many that we've done in others. But hopefully you'll look at the dollar sign a little differently at this point and how it provides the roadmap to unlocking exponential results.
I just want to comment on these examples. I think they're pretty powerful when you step back and see what's possible, kind of the power of what's possible. I loved the question that guy asked around the exponential growth. He said it doesn't last forever. What's the best way to set a reasonable, achievable long-term goals and expectations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my first goal is looking exponentially, because I think there's where we're going to see the growth. I'm not suggesting that this is the full long-term play, but I'd rather focus on making some big leaps, not just catching up and squabbling over little turfs and little movements. I think once you've made that leap, sustaining it doesn't necessarily need to be exponential, but we have to continually hold ourselves accountable to continually optimizing and evolving and keeping that relationship built, keeping it fresh.
It's really good. I see another question here that talks about pop-ups, banners. What role do these play in the conversion strategy, and are they effective or intrusive?
It depends. I'm not a big fan of just looking at pop-ups or banners, and I think it has a lot to do with what's right for the experience and what is going to draw attention, draw the user's attention. And I think what's beautiful about the digital destination is the Z depth is endless. So I think you have to look at it in layers, and it's not a book. It's not a page. So you have the ability to, create places of interest. Parallax is an old term that's used, but I like that there to be these micro moments, these movements, these micro interactions that will draw people's attention to important pieces of content. And I think where appropriate, providing those types of things. And I wouldn't necessarily call them just pop-ups or banners, but they may be experiences that do come off of the page or build over the page and or call more attention than others. But that will take advantage, because that'll allow that customer to kind of navigate a site, what interests them the most, and potentially see something that they weren't there to do in the first place.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. Mo, we have a question for you. Composable has been around for a while. With Gen AI and the new techs emerging, is now the right time to jump into composable? Why do these new techs make now a better time than previously?
Yeah, I think that's a great question around. And yes, I would say composable, I think, has always had a potential, but the cost of going to composable versus the value has always been the big question mark that a lot of people had. But with Gen AI, and we've seen that, especially like with e-commerce, for instance, and the ability to compose your commerce solution as you want, this drastically showed how how companies who were using composability were able to innovate with generative AI much faster than ones that were tied down to, let's say, a commerce platform and waiting for that commerce platform to bring in generative AI. So I think Gen AI just made it more obvious to everyone the value of composability.
That's great. I'm going to read another question from Eric here. For me. So your example of Starbucks evolving from a commodity to a good and a service to experience is great. How are they or others you've worked with evolving from experience to transformation? Any examples that come to mind? One of the, when I think about some of the examples that Paul gave here, I have an example in my own space where we worked with a hospital to take them from 1 star to 3 stars. And again, it all comes back down to experience as the first base layer. And then once you've nailed the experience, you can layer transformation on top of that. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about experience, and what I've seen a lot of organizations do is everyone gets into a room and they stare at just the data alone, but they don't go out and talk to their customer. They don't engage deeply with their customer in order to bring back those challenges and turn them into insights. And we've talked a lot about insights today because data for data's sake is not enough. We have to turn them into insights and then wisdom and make good decisions off of them. And so oftentimes one of the first things we did, which is very painful, is you read through all those 1-star reviews. You call some of those people back, you re-engage them, and you ask them the hard questions in order to get to the place where you can create a well-rounded experience that then leads into you being able to transform. I personally feel that transformation is kind of a end result of nailing your experience. Once you can nail that experience, you can really connect to this ecosystem we're talking about today and really understand how to transform the client experience or the customer experience, which most of the time, I feel like people don't spend enough time thinking about how to be customer obsessed. I love the early Amazon stories of where they put a empty seat for the customer. What are we doing to bring the customer into every conversation we're having and to ensure that we're building the right thing in the right place?
I want to add one more thing to Eric's question, and you get cut off after asking 2 or more questions, by the way. Eric's our CEO. I think still one of the best examples today is the transformation that Domino's Pizza did. And I look at it, and there's a bunch of things to look at there that, you can date back to 2010, but the pizza tracker, I love that thing. And what do I like about it is it really helps manage expectations, and it solved a problem. I think a lot of people were ordering pizzas that weren't getting delivered, but here's this simple tool that creates that dialogue and relationship with the customer of, hey, we're building your pizza, so-and-so's doing it, it's in the oven, it's out for delivery. It helps manage that expectation. Now, can you imagine going through the boardroom and talking about their infrastructure of technology to make that thing come to reality? We're going to do what? Wait, how is each store going to manage clicking a button or doing this to say we're going to be able to tell our customers on a global scale how to, where we are in the process? Yet they pulled it off. They went from a pizza company to a technology company. And I still think that's one of the better examples. And I love to use that pizza tracker just because I think it crosses many industries of how we can manage those expectations. I know furniture companies have had to manage expectations on delivery times, with back ordered items and those types of things. But is there a way to keep it communicative, keep that dialogue going, and manage those expectations?
It's a powerful example. I mean, the pizza tracker goes across the board and how you can transform your company. I love that example. That's a good one.
I know we did a poll, and I know we have time for questions. I don't know who takes over from here.
Yeah, I know Jarrett's going to join us again.
Jared, if
Yes. Yeah, I can
we
go
can
ahead.
roll into.
And let's see here. I can actually pull up the results of that poll if you want to stop sharing your screen really quickly, Paul. Here we go. And we see up first, we've got as important as our products and services in the ranking of customer experience. Second place looks like important, but is not a primary focus. Third place here, important, but secondary to our products/services and price. We got a good bit of responses here, and it looks like it is as important as products and services for a good majority of the people here.
Paul, my question would be for those who've said important but not primary, or maybe it's secondary, what would your advice be if after listening to this webinar, they now know it should be primary, the first and most important thing? How can they go back and convince others of that truth?
Well, you can show them these stats even from this poll or others from the ones we shared in this presentation. I think there are a lot of examples out there on the experience shaping and changing the game. I think the most important thing is that in those examples, it's not a primary focus or it's secondary. I go back to you're not thinking like a customer. And if you're not thinking like a customer, I think you've got a little bit more of an uphill battle. Listen, I do not want you all to abandon your products and services, but I think if you're not putting the customer first, it's going to show. And I think if it's not your primary focus, it better be pretty close to being up there. Because the other way that I'll answer the question is that if you're focusing on your products and services, how are you translating that into an experience? How are you making those products and or services come to life? You're inevitably talking about the experience. So I think that in some ways, like I said, design, content, and technology need to be intertwined. I think the experience about those products and services almost need to become intertwined. We've got to, create a symbiotic relationship between those three things, where it's not just doing the same old thing of yes, research and development on products and services that are unique are very, very important. But how do those come to life? How do you share those and create experience around them?
Excellent. Well, it looks like we are closing in on time here. Paul, Natalie, Mo, I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your insight with us. I'd like to thank Arke for making today's webinar possible. And I'd like to thank everybody out in the audience for your time and attention today. Today's webinar has been recorded, so you'll be receiving a link to that recording and a follow-up email. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. Until next time, I'll see you on the next one.
And I'll just add, please reach out with the contact information if we didn't get to your question, and love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.